Hi, today I'll be showing you how to promote when you have double pawns. And double pawns are a useful tool when you're blockaded, like in this example, because you can use the second one at the very last second. It's like a trump card. So when you move your king to d3, then the king goes back, keeping the blockade. So king e4, king e6, d5, king d6, king d4, king d7, king e5, king e7, d6, king d7, king d5, and then the king goes back again. So king d8. This looks like a stalemate. After king e6, king e8, d7, king d8. Now you don't go to king d6 because that's a stalemate, but normally it's the only move, except that we have a double pawn. And by pushing the double pawn just one square, it's the other king's move. And we call this a reserve tempo. After king d7, king e7, sorry, after king c7, king e7, and then the pawn's going to promote. So this double pawn really just serves as a reserve tempo, which means it's like a pass. Like if you ever play Uno, you'll see that you get like a turn to pass to the other person, and that's what this really is. It's like, here, I'm not going to move, it's your turn, even though we did move by pushing the pawn d2, d3, which looks like it doesn't do anything, but it really does. It gives the other person the time to move again. It's like a skip. So looking at this initial position again, you could push the pawn to d3, but it's not technically a good idea, because the closer the double pawns get to the end, the better chances you have of stalemating, and that's not a good idea. Like in this example, this is white to move here, and if we push the king to here, trying to get to d6, well, after king e5, king d7, and then the king has to move again. There's no reserve tempo. So, for example, king e5, king d7, and now after king e4, the king takes the pawn, and it's a draw. So we're not going to move the king to e5. That's a blunder. And we could move the king to d4, so that if king d7, king e5, now it's his move, he has to move out the way, but the problem is after king d4, he could just play king c8. He doesn't have to go here because it's a trap. And the only way to get to the point is to play king f5, then king d7, king e5. The point of king f5 is to move to king e6. So he's trying to stop that by playing king d7. So then we play king to e5, and the game continues. King d8, king e6, king e8, d7, king d8, and this is the problem. If you play king d6, then it's stalemate. You want to use the reserve tempo, but the pawn is too far up the board. After d6, it's still a stalemate, and that's the problem. What happens when you push the second pawn too far? It's not a good idea. You have to keep it as far back as possible. In a position where you have this right here, I want to show an important point. You can have the pawns, you can have one on the 5th rank or more, but not both past the 5th rank. So after white goes here to king e5, king e7, d6, king e7, king d5, king e8, keeping the blockade, king e6, king e8, d7, king d8, and now we can play d5. There's no stalemate. King c7, king e7, and the pawn promotes. So let's look at this problem where we have another issue with finding out if this pawn is going to be captured. First of all, this king is in the square, so it's about to be captured. The threat is king e5, capturing the pawn and then setting up a blockade for this pawn on f4 and f3. but we can prevent that with f4. So after that move, the king wants to get to this square. It's going to take 3 moves. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. That's the process that the king is going to use. And we have to get to the protection of this pawn by that square, by that time. Which means we have 1, 2, 3. Yeah, so in 3 moves we can get to the protection of the square. So king d6, king c2, king d7, king d3, king f7. What's this? Wait, can't we just protect the pawn by moving king e4? No, because as we saw in the last puzzle, it's a trap. And now we have to give up one of the pawns, and that's a draw. So that's the trap that you have to watch out for. And we could just do the same thing we did before, king d4, threatening to play king e5. And for example, if king e7, king e5, and the pawn is going to promote, like we saw just a while ago, this pawn will be used as a reserve tempo. So after king e4, king d4, king f6, and now we can play king e4. The pawn's going to promote. King e7, king e5, king f7, f6, king f8, king e6, king e8, f7, king f8, f5, and the pawn promotes. King g7, king e7, king h7, and actually this is a funny stalemate trap to watch out for. If you promote to a queen right now, it's stalemate. The king can't go anywhere because the queen prevents this escape, prevents that escape, and this pawn prevents that escape. So the king is completely stalemated. So you have to watch out for that trap. Instead, you can pass the move again to him by playing king e8. And now the only squares are the ones where the queen will check him, which is great for us. So the king can only go here to the dark squares, and because the queen will be here, the queen can affect these squares. He's going to get checked. For example, king h6, and you know, that's an easy one. So that's how you solve these problems. And you know, if it was black to move, then black just goes here, like we discussed. Now here we have the knight's pawn, and the knight's pawn is a bit tricky. So obviously not king to c3 because of king d5. So we have to go around. King c2, king c6. He wants us to fall for the trap, but we're not falling for it. King d3, king c6, king b6. If he tries king b5, it's the same thing. King c3, and then king c6, king c4. So he plays king b6, king c4, king c6, and b5, king b6, king b4, b7, king c5, king c7, b6, king b7, king b5, king b8, king c6, king c8, c7, c8, and now we can just push the pawn. So he moves out the way. And there had to be a trick somewhere. And the trick is this. When you push the pawn here on the 4th rank, and then you play king b7, king b6, king b8, king c6, king c8, b7, king b8, and then you use a reserve tempo, well, that's going to be a stalemate. Unfortunately, if after b5, king b7, you push the king c7, that's stalemate. But all is not lost. What you do here is the only way to save yourself, you know, and you also can't play b6 because of king b8, and you have to lose a pawn. So instead, you sacrifice the pawn. He takes it, and now you can play. Well, actually, you can play king b6, and then king a8, king a6, king b8. Okay, well, that's not gonna work. So right now you're blockaded. He's blockaded. Actually, you play king c7, then king a7, and then you promote with check. So yeah, you can see it's a bit tricky. So let's see if there's anything I'm missing. Yeah, you don't want to play b6 because of king c8, b7, b8, king b8, and then it's stalemate. So again, get in front of the king, which is the strategy we used in the second video on removing the blockade. And then king c8 is the easy one. You play king a7, guaranteeing the pawn's promotion. So king a8, king c7, king a7, check. And now we have the trickiest situation of them all. We have this where the king can only go between a8 and b7. Because if he tries to capture this pawn on b6, this pawn simply promotes and then the game is over. So, for example, king b, it's white to move, so king b4, king b7, king c6, king c5, king a8. Now we can't play king c6 because it's stalemate. King c6, and then we have a barrier here. This pawn is protected right here, and yeah, it's completely in the red. So now we can't play that, so we have to play king d6. After king b7, then it looks like a stalemate. But in order to understand this position, we can also go here to the one without the double pawn. And we do the same thing as before. King b4, king b7, king c5, king a8. And not king c6 stalemate, but king d6, king d7. And we can play king d7, although it's a bit longer. So we first have to get to this pattern. And it's a pretty easy pattern to get to. Right here it's white to move. b7, and then the king has to get out the way. And then we promote. So this is the pattern we have to get to with black to move. Right here, black to move. So white to move here. And then black to move. And it looks similar. So take a quick look at the similarities. And you'll see that by right here and this, by sacrificing the pawn, the king takes, we move the king there, the only move is here, and it's the same pattern. d7, king a7, king c7. So now we know how to do this one because we have to end up sacrificing a pawn. So right now we just simply play king to, a8 queen, king takes, and now we don't play king c6 just yet because of the stalemate that we saw earlier. King c6, king b8, b7, king a7, and now king c7. But now we can actually sacrifice the second pawn, and then we can push this pawn forward after king takes b8, b6, and now it looks like it's a stalemate. So you don't want to do that either. Instead, you play king b6, and then after king a8, king c7, king a7, b6, and the pawn promotes. So all in all, you just have to watch out for those tricky situations. And so if you enjoyed this video, give it a like. If you would like to donate, then the link is in the description. And basically those pawns are just like any other pawns except that you have a reserved tempo in the back. They're not as strong as the isolated pawns, which we'll take a look at in the next video.